This is the Benefits Buzz Podcast, your weekly pulse on what's happening in the world of employee benefits. Brought to you by your friends at WEX, who believe in simplifying benefits for everyone. Now listen up and let's get buzzed! Hey everyone, it's another episode of Benefits Buzz. We've got a goodie queued up for you this week. Kelsey, my co-host Kelsey Burgad, we are going to be talking about LSAs, which we've talked about before, but we're also going to talk about an interesting benefit called wellness HRA. And we want to kind of talk about how these two are different, similar, compare and contrast. Maybe it's a giant battle grudge match between the benefits that these bring to employers and employees.
Yeah, we hear about LSAs all the time. I think they've been a trend going on for like 3 years. But it's just interesting because I think one of the first times that I heard about an LSA, I was like, oh, that's just a wellness HRA, right? And, our guest kind of looked at me like, no, not quite. So it's probably a good time to have him on to come chat about the differences.
Yeah, for sure. I think employees are just looking. I mean, we know the environment and temperature of every one of our population, right? Like they're looking at benefits in a new way, right? Mental health is getting the much needed attention that it needs. And people are just thinking about benefits in a new way. We can even go into the whole great resignation, but I think there's just a lot of focus on benefits and the value they provide. So I love this topic. I love this timing. And to nerd out on all this with us, we've got one of our favorite guests we love to have on the show, Jonas Sovey. Jonas is our senior product manager of benefits side here at WEX. Jonas, welcome again to our podcast, sir.
Hey guys, it's good to be back.
Yeah, and we got you on camera this time, man. I love it. Look how sharp you look.
Hey, thanks. It's got the nerves up, but I'm ready to roll.
Clean up like a shiny penny, my friend. I love it. Well, let's jump into this. We've got some fun questions queued up for you as we kind of dive into these two. So in terms of benefits demand, right? What are you hearing right now when it comes to, whether it's employee wellness or these lifestyle needs or LSAs?
Yeah. So before talking about the benefits demand, I think it's important to really set the stage on where we're at as a nation with employment, with COVID, et cetera. And so it's been quite the whirlwind over the last year in terms of the unemployment rate. Prior to COVID, of course, it was, historic lows around 4%. And right now we're trending towards 5%. And so, the amount of people looking for jobs is down significantly. Meanwhile, the amount of organizations looking to attract and retain talent is up significantly. I just looked at a report or presentation from SHRM yesterday and said 9 out of 10 organizations are currently finding it difficult to hire certain positions, right? So attracting and retaining talent is more difficult right now than ever. People have the flexibility to work from home. Companies have the flexibility to hire people really from anywhere in the world. So the amount of competition is just enormous. And so we're seeing companies shift their focus from, to really focus on being a best place to work and find ways to retain people, and as opposed to, hiring new, because that's so difficult, especially in today's, and it costs a lot of money. And, at this point, people have more ownership and, ability to control their careers and flexibility to go find something new, given all of that. And so when we talk about benefits demand, I think it's important to think about those things. And ultimately, companies are focused on, to your point, mental health, but also like, how do I give benefits to my employees to get them to want to stay here, to be excited about work, to bring their best to work every day. And so when I think about like benefits, they really affect people's wellness and lifestyle in every way, regardless of benefit, right? Are they happy about it? Maybe they're perform better. So, I really view all benefits touching all those aspects of people's lives. But, in terms of what we're hearing, companies are looking for flexibility and choice, give employees dollars to spend on things that meet their needs and their lifestyles versus, one benefit might support a portion of your population, but not all of your population. So really finding those benefits that resonate with employees, whether it's, the ability to work from home and remote. Of course, that's maybe not a formal benefit, but it's a benefit. And if you don't offer that, people might go elsewhere. Tuition, student loans, 401k, unlimited PTO, and dollars to use for self-care, personal interest, et cetera. And, I think a lot about like supporting people's work-life balance. The amount of hours they're logged in at home, no physical barriers to get out of the office per se, making sure they're meeting their childcare needs and things like that. So it's really tough to get away. And so offering benefits that support people's lifestyles promotes healthy behavior really could be the difference between, not only attracting new talent, but also retaining existing.
I mean, everywhere you go, there's a sign that says help wanted or looking for this or hiring, or I mean, it's crazy. I don't feel like I've ever seen it. And to your point with the stats that you shared earlier, it's never been like this before where there's been this amount of open jobs. So I know that you touched on a ton of different benefit offerings, whether they're formal, like you said, or something informal, like working from home or just having flexibility. But cover off on, and we've talked about LSAs, lifestyle spending accounts, so many times on this podcast because it is such a popular topic. But for those who maybe haven't listened in the past, like just break down what an LSA is for us versus maybe what a wellness HRA is for us.
Yeah, sounds good. So I'm going to keep this reply fairly brief because I know we're going to get into the weeds and the meat and potatoes of each of those in a bit. But just really at the basic level, lifestyle spending account, or LSA, is a post-tax benefit that an employer funds. And because it's post-tax and doesn't cover healthcare expenses, there's a lot of flexibility for employers to build a benefit that matches their values, their culture, their interests, their budget, and use it in a way to make their employees happy and bring in potential employees. And ultimately, it's a benefit that's designed to give your employees value regardless of their interest, right? And we'll talk about eligible expenses that will relate to that in a bit, but ultimately create a benefit that all employees can use in a way that meets their lifestyle, as opposed to one that they try to make work for their lifestyle. So that is the summary on LSA. And a wellness HRA, big distinction is it's pre-tax, right? And because it's pre-tax and it comes with the HRA regulations, there's going to be more things you need to do to be within compliance. Think about HIPAA, ERISA, non-discrimination testing, and comes with less flexibility. And so typically HRAs, there are a number that are allowed through regulations, but the most common is one that is integrated with a group health plan, which is what we'll be talking about right now. And so, you're thinking about that pre-tax benefit and a wellness HRA, it's going to be for the people and the employees who are enrolled in your group health plan. And your eligible expenses are going to be far more restrictive because it is pre-tax, and the IRS determines what is allowed. That's pre-tax.
Yeah, I love that. I appreciate the background there. I think it's important to clarify that, even though we've talked before in the podcast. And so some of those benefits are really good, and we'll actually then kind of break down these two different plans. But before we do so, what are some of the things that, common cases or things that employers are trying to solve when it comes to this? I know we've talked about, benefits and standing out, but when we think about the actual benefit itself, like we had a really cool episode prior this season where we talked about the city of Vale, who had just done an LSA for their employees, and they got like ski passes, and it was just something relevant for that community who were passionate about something. But I'd love to hear any more kind of common cases of organizations using LSAs.
Yeah, I think that's a really fantastic example. And while we definitely want to lead with a standardized eligible expense list, there's certainly flexibility there. You definitely have some employers who are looking to do specific things versus kind of offering everything to everybody. And so there's some uniqueness there for sure. But I think generally we see employers just generally want to give their employees dollars in a way that meets their needs. So ski passes is a good example there. I think we've done a really good job of creating a list that could be applicable to really all organizations and all walks of life. And so it's kind of tough, I think, to go down specific paths beyond kind of that holistic approach. But if employers have specific needs, I'd say ask those questions, figure out what you can include. And but otherwise, we really got a good baseline for the things to kind of apply to the different walks of life for sure.
Yeah, ski passes aren't going to work here in Fargo, North Dakota, really. So,
I mean, they could if you go on vacation,
Good point.
I can share some other general thoughts about like how employees' needs have evolved, types of benefits that have, how they've evolved over the years, and these types of benefits can help them. So, we talk about work from home, no physical barriers. People are really required and enabled to have more ownership over their behavior, right, and their decisions, like making sure they take breaks, making sure they're taking care of themselves, and in that work from home environment. So there's really an increased need to be intentional about your behavior and mindful about getting away and doing things that are not work related, because there are, no physical barriers. And so when you think about what employers are trying to do in maybe a more general sense, is keeping people mindful and thoughtful about what they're doing day in and day out. Because unless you take an intentional moment to stop or think, hey, I've got this benefit, I can go buy a ski pass or a golf pass or a gym membership, or something for my basement and help pay for a Peloton, whatever it might be. That those are the types of triggers that are going to cause people to maybe change their behavior and get out of that routine of working 10 hours a day and not taking care of themselves. On the wellness HRA side, more specifically, those are often used to incentivize specific behaviors, right? So it could be to get someone to go get their wellness checkup, to get an immunization, or to, those types of things. So I look at those more as ways to incentivize ways and behaviors in employees to take actions that help them be more mindful and healthy.
Yeah, so that's a great segue. I think, you've covered off on some of the reasons why somebody would want to offer these to their employees, but can you cover off for those who maybe aren't as familiar with just some eligible expenses that fit in that LSA bucket versus the ones that fit into the wellness HRA bucket? Just a little bit deeper for those who maybe don't know. And I know we talked about ski passes, but there's so much more than just ski passes that are involved in this, right?
Yeah. So I think the easy thing to bucket it, we typically do, is physical, financial, emotional wellness, and maybe kind of an other bucket in that last one. So physical, gym membership, fitness trackers, ski or golf passes would be just some few brief examples in that topic. Financial wellness. So if someone's purchasing a home, helping them with some costs for that. They could be looking for a financial advisor. They could be taking, financial seminars or classes to get more intentional and mindful about their budgeting and expenses. And then emotional wellness, non-medical counseling. So there's that distinction between, medical and healthcare expenses to avoid those requirements that come with healthcare expenses like HRAs have. You want to avoid that with LSAs to not have undue regulations on your plans. And so non-medical counseling would be one. Marital counseling is an easy example there. Development classes, so personal development. It could be park passes, hunting and fishing licenses, or some other examples. Maybe those go under physical wellness, but I think they also really feed the emotional wellness pretty well as well. So that would be the LSA expenses. And then I think the wellness HRA ones are probably a lot less, you don't have to elaborate quite as much, because they're really 213D expenses, those healthcare expenses, those things that are allowed through pre-tax benefits with like FSAs, HSAs, et cetera. But of course, the expenses can be customized within that if an employer wanted to, incentivize certain things.
So based on what I'm hearing, it sounds like if you're an employer, you can offer both of these plans together, right? You don't have to offer one or the other, obviously pending budgets and what your goals you're trying to achieve. But would that be accurate, Jonas?
Yeah, for sure. That HRA is going to come with its requirements, but being tied to an LSA or not tied to an LSA is not one of those. It's a post-tax benefit. It's not healthcare related. So if you had an employer who was interested in offering both, they certainly could. And I think they would meet different needs.
All right. So you can do both, but let's talk about maybe the key differentiators, right? And trying to determine if one of these might be the right fit for your employees or the others. So do you have any, because again, I don't like, it's more dramatic when you can pit them against each other, even though I know they play nice, but what are some of the differentiators you might call out as people think about which one should I offer? Yeah.
And I think when you get into the weeds, it becomes really clear what might work for you. Now, when you design it, that gets more weedy, but at the base layer, that lifestyle spending account, it's post-tax. Employers can choose who is eligible for it, how much they want to contribute, when do they want to contribute, what non-medical expenses do you want your employees to use it on. So really, you're looking at somebody's, or employees are looking at their behaviors, their day-to-day life outside of work, and how do I spend my days? How could this benefit help incentivize or compensate the things I'm already doing or potentially interested in doing? And so you're looking at your employee base as a whole in theory, or maybe trying to break it down to specific sets of employees. But what I'm getting at is you're not tied to a group health plan and you're not tied to healthcare expenses, right? And so, that distinction there was probably going to, draw employers that are interested in this in one direction or another. Whereas on the wellness HRA side, again, you're limited to people who are enrolled in the group health plan. You're really limited to your eligible expenses. And so are you trying to, I guess, incentivize healthy behavior and compensate healthcare expenses, or are you trying to incentivize healthy behavior in a way that's more someone's hobbies and interests rather than tied to their healthcare?
So we have employers listening, right? And they're understanding the difference between the two, some similarities, some differences. What are some factors they should take into consideration to determine maybe which one is best for them and their organization?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it really ties down to, what are your employees interested in? What are they going to find value in? Personally, I'm guessing a lot of people could relate. Like, it's tough to get excited about maybe a healthcare benefit versus like, hey, I'm already spending this money on this gym membership or my fishing pass or license or whatever it might be. And so those types of things that you hit people on a personal level, as opposed to like a work and health level, right? You think about those things as kind of one and tied together in today's world. And so I think that's probably a really big thing to think about, is that employee's perception of those benefits. Because in theory, if we're having this conversation, you're probably already offering a medical plan. You're probably pairing with an FSA, an HSA, maybe an HRA. And so, do you want to further compound on that benefit area, or do you want to offer something new and exciting that really potentially resonates with your employees? But employers know their employees best. And so, think about what are they interested in, not only of who you have, but who you might want to hire. And that's going to vary from every industry and every employer.
Yeah, I was going to say it probably comes down to what we talked about earlier with, so many open positions right now and just this fight for good talent. So it probably comes down to what are your goals when attracting new talent and even retaining the talent you have too.
Yeah, and if all things are equal, then those ancillary benefits might be what draws that person's attention and gets them to making a decision in your favor.
What about budget? I feel like I hear this question a lot when, specifically when an LSA comes up. So I'm curious from your perspective, if an employer is like, okay, you've convinced me an LSA is where it's at. I know this would be a tool that could help me recruit new talent or keep my current employees. What would the expectation be for budget, do you think?
Yeah, I get your averages, and also that it's post-tax and there's no requirements, right? There's no limit, minimum. There's no maximum, and so there's total flexibility there. What we've seen on average is employers typically provide about $650, give or take, a year. Oftentimes that is provided fully upfront in the beginning of the plan year, and people can figure out how to allocate those dollars throughout the year. Some might do it per month or quarter. Those would be the most common scenarios. We do see some who offer in the thousands, and that would take that average up to like 950. But if you remove those outliers, $650 a year is the most common kind of range we see with LSAs. And if you want to keep it really simple, that's about $50 a month. And if you think about gym memberships, things like that, that's typically about what they cost. And so that, I think that amount and that frequency of contributions is definitely what we're seeing as the most common.
Yeah, it's really fun to hear these laid out. Certainly some similarities, but I think you're right? There's definitely unique benefits, and how you position them can be really interesting. If I'm an employer listening right now, and what I want to have on my tool belt, and what do I want to use to, like you said, at the beginning of our discussion, is how do we stand out? How do we get attention? How do we recruit? How do we retain? And these can be really cool tools. This has been fun to dive into, and nerd out a bit on it. And I like to think that our producer Hayden does like a really good job of like finding the right questions. But is there anything that we haven't dug into yet? Is there anything that we haven't pulled out of you, Jonas, that you want to leave with our listeners regarding these two, or making the right decision about these two, that you just kind of leave as a lasting impression for them?
Yeah, I think we've hit the key points. If I were to leave you guys with one thing, I think it'd be around the costs around hiring and work-related stress. And I believe we may have hit these same stats in the prior webinar, but I do think prior podcast. I think they're still super pertinent, and probably even more so today than ever, right? So prior to the hiring issues that the nation is seeing right now, on average is over $4,000 in cost per new hire, as well as 42 days to fill a position, according to SHRM. So I can only imagine those numbers have gotten even worse. So everything you can do to retain existing talent is going to make a difference. And also, costs related to indirect costs related to work stress was about almost $1,700 per year per employee. So if your employees are stressed, they're probably missing work more often. And when they are at work, they're probably being less less mindful, less present. And so the things you can do related to wellness or these benefits is, support them in ways that allows them to disconnect or take care of themselves, reduce that stress, be more present, and really save those costs at work. So I think those two stats just continue to resonate with me when I talk about LSAs and even wellness HRAs. And so it's something to keep in mind as you consider these benefits.
Yeah, awesome points. So whether you are, an HR pro who is just responsible for recruiting and retention, and it sounds like it's a good time to have a conversation with whoever's in charge of, right, your benefits, and get creative and think about these potentially as a great way to differentiate yourself from other employers. And if you're doing it all, well, good luck, because then you got a lot on your plate. Those stats are super scary, right? I mean, there's a lot on top of HR professionals' minds, and now having sort of this shortage, right? This great resignation and trying to keep this is a lot to handle. So this, at least at a minimum, Jonas, you've given them a great thing to, a great sort of set of benefits to really think about, to understand, and to dive in deeper to do so. So we appreciate you coming on the show and talking it through. It's been fun to dive into this. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about an upcoming event we have regarding HSAs. We have a really cool event called HSA Day. It's National HSA Awareness Day on October 15th, because if you don't know, now you know. And we're doing some fun energy around there. We've got the SHRM CEO, Johnny Taylor. We've got Jennifer McClure, who is the CEO of Disrupt HR, and Stephanie O'Connor Rodriguez, who is a financial expert, millennial money expert, talking about HSAs. So I know it's a kind of a tangent to this particular benefit, but we're just so damn giddy about it that we want to make sure you get a plug for that too. So keep an eye out for that. HSA Day coming up October 15th. WEX is in the business of simplifying benefits for everyone. Now, although we certainly hope our podcast sparks some aha moments, like that was pretty cool, but of course we cannot provide legal, investment, or financial advice. And, well, therefore, nothing shared in this podcast should be interpreted as such. We encourage you to seek out appropriate professional advice regarding your plans. Hey, congratulations! You made it through our disclaimer. Thanks for listening.